Thus far, American high-tech weaponry appears to be performing exceptionally well against Iraq. But will it be enough to drive Iraq from Kuwait? Joining us here in Washington, two defense experts. Pierre Sprey, a former Pentagon systems analyst who helped design the F-16 fighter, and CNN military analyst James Blackwell. Gentlemen, as you look at the weapons arrayed in the theater, is there any one particular system that gives you cause for confidence or cause for concern?
Well, I think so far in the air campaign, we can say that the F-16 has certainly performed well, as has the F-15, particularly on evidence of today's aerial combat.
Mr. Sprey?
Well, on the positive side, I think the A-10 is doing remarkably well. It so far seems to have been the only airplane around that can successfully find mobile Scud launchers and knock them out. We expect it'll play a far more important role if a ground war starts, because it is probably the finest close support airplane in the world.
What about on the ground?
Well, that's where I have great and deep concerns.
Can you quickly tick them off?
Well, to execute the kind of campaign we want on the ground, that is a quick campaign where we win by mass shock and surprise, we need tanks that move quickly and reliably. We need armored personnel carriers that can carry infantry safely, and we need anti-tank weapons for that infantry that can face superior tank forces. I'm very afraid that on those grounds we're in deep trouble. The tank will have terrific trouble with mobility, is having already trouble with mobility. The armored personnel carrier is extremely dangerous to occupants, so dangerous that people will not ride in it in combat. And the three anti-tank weapons that are all that our infantry have between them and Iraqi tanks, I think have a very high chance of failing them catastrophically in combat.
James Blackwell, is Pierre Sprey an alarmist? Is what he says true, first of all?
Well, I think it's basically incorrect, and he's about as wrong on that score as he was when he said the Stinger had no sting. Thank goodness that the freedom fighters in Afghanistan didn't listen to him back then. The facts of the matter are that we have the best tank in the world, the best infantry fighting vehicle in the world, and the anti-tank, the anti-armor weapons in the hands of the infantry will penetrate Iraqi armor.
Mr. Sprey, after you respond to what Mr. Blackwell just said, I have a question for both of you, please.
Well, I'd like to speak simply from the operational tests and the combat experience so far on these grounds. On operational tests, the tank exhibited more than 5 times the failure rate of the previous tank. That bodes poorly for mobility. Its gas consumption, instead of being 1.5 gallons to the mile, ran 4.5 to 9 gallons to the mile. That means another problem in the mobility area. The Army was so concerned about its advertised survivability that a brilliant and brave colonel in the Pentagon named James Burton, who proposed to test the tank very realistically with Soviet weapons, was driven out of the Pentagon and had his career ruined because of that test. The anti-tank weapons, the first one, the shoulder-fired bazooka, already failed us miserably in Vietnam. We had cases of 7 hits on a Soviet light tank that failed to stop it. The TOW, I think you've seen some footage on TV already. The TOW in combat, it's never really been tested in combat, but the operational tests tell us it has major failings and that it's so dangerous to fire it because of the exposed position of the gunner and the long time to remain exposed. I think it will require almost superhuman courage to fire it.
I have a question for each of you. You are learned in your fields, yet you've just presented to our viewers 2 totally different assessments. Why? Second question is, Mr. Sprey, if what you say is true, why would these weapons be deployed in the theater at this critical moment with so many lives at stake?
Well, Bernie,
let's take the first one. Why this disparity in your points of view?
The answer to that one's easy, Bernie. Pierre Sprey is playing loose and easy with the facts, and none of them that he's just recited are correct. I don't know why we're having this debate, except that perhaps it's intended to have some effect on our own troops. I think it borders on criminal to be telling our troops that are in the field now, whose lives depend on those weapons, that their commanders and the leaders of this country are sending them into battle with something that's going to get them killed. It's not true.
Mr. Sprey?
Well, I've spent most of my adult life trying to make sure that the weapons we send our troops into combat with will serve those troops well. And I think having my patriotism impugned for being concerned about the weapons that they have is a disgusting tactic. I'm quoting basically from years and years of analyzing operational test reports and combat results just for the purpose of trying to make sure that we provide weapons that work. Now, the people who've been with these weapons, like the tow gunners, for instance, know even better than I do what problems they're facing. I'm not telling them something they don't know.
Before we go any further, James Blackwell, are you impugning Pierre Spray's patriotism?
Not at all. In fact, I respect him for standing up in many ways against an awful lot of criticism. And indeed, many of his colleagues in the systems analysis business have given him great credit. It's a little bit too late to be playing loose and easy with the facts, however, and that's what I'm criticizing.
Mr. Spray?
Well, I'm very willing to go into the facts on any one of these.
Well, you know, I've fired a whole bunch of tow missiles in operational units and never missed one and never failed to have one penetrate a tank target.
Well, let me give you some examples. We did some testing as part of the live fire testing program of the tow missile out at Socorro, New Mexico. We had probably the most experienced tow gunner in the world to fire that missile. Because of the limitations of the range, we had our target set up at moderately close range, ranges that are very realistic for desert warfare.
Mr. Spray,
that gunner missed 4 times in a row.
Okay, Mr. Spray, don't think me rude. I have to interrupt because we're running out of time. I think you've had sufficient time to make your point of view. You question the capability and the proficiency of some of the weapons in the theater. And Mr. Blackwell, of course, is outraged by your contention. I only interrupt you because we have less than 30 seconds, and if you are permitted to speak for another minute, the other side should be heard from. So that's why I step in and I say time out, and I thank you for joining us. Catherine and I will be right back.